Dr. Sharkar stood up. He was about to take his leave. Sri Ramakrishna also stood up. Dr. Sharkar, people call on God when they are faced with a crisis. Is it for the mere fun of it that they say, "O Lord, thou, thou"? You speak of God because of that trouble in your throat. You have now fallen into the clutches of the cotton carder. You had better speak to the carder. I am just quoting your own words. Master, there is nothing for me to say. Dr. Sharkar, why not? We lie in the lap of God. We feel free with Him. To whom should we speak about our illness, if not to Him? Master, right you are. Once in a while, I tried to speak to Him about it, but I do not succeed. Dr. Sharkar, why should you even speak to Him? Does He not know of it? Master, smiling. A Mussalman, while saying his prayers, shouted, "O Allah! O Allah!" Another person said to him, "You are calling on Allah. That's all right. But why are you shouting like that? Don't you know that He hears the sounds of the anklet on the feet of an ant? When the mind is united with God, one sees Him very near, in one's own heart. But you must remember one thing. The more you realize this unity, the farther your mind is withdrawn from worldly things. There is the story of the Bilva Mangal in the Bhaktamala. He used to visit a prostitute. One night, he was very late in going to her house. He had been detained at home by the Shraddha ceremony of his father and mother. In his hands, he was carrying the food offered in the ceremony to feed his mistress. His whole soul was so set upon the woman that he was not at all conscious of his movements. He did not even know how he was walking. There was a yogi seated on the path, meditating on God with eyes closed. Bilva Mangal stepped on him. The yogi became angry and cried out, "What? Are you blind? I have been thinking of God and you step on my body?" "I beg your pardon," said Bilva Mangal. "But may I ask you something? I have been unconscious thinking of a prostitute. And you are conscious of the outer world, though thinking of God?" What kind of meditation is that? In the end, Bilva Mangal renounced the world and went away in order to worship God. He said to the prostitute, "You are my Guru. You have taught me how one should yearn for God." He addressed the prostitute as his mother and gave her up. Dr. Sarkar, to address a woman as a mother is the tantric form of worship. Master, listen to a story. There was a king who used daily to hear the Bhagavata recited by a Pundit. Every day, after explaining the sacred book, the Pundit would say to the king, "O king, have you understood what I have said?" And every day the king would reply, "You had better understand it yourself." The Pundit would return home and think, "Why does the king talk to me that way day after day?" I explain the text to him so clearly, and he says to me, "You had better understand it first yourself." What does he mean? The Pandit used to practice spiritual discipline. A few days later, he came to realize that God alone is real and everything else, house, family, wealth, friends, name and fame, illusory. Convinced of the unreality of the world, he renounced it. As he left home, he asked a man to take his message to the king. "O king, I now understand." Here is another story. A man needed a scholar of the Bhagavad to expound the sacred text to him every day. But it was very difficult to procure such a scholar. After he had searched a great deal, another man came to him and said, "Sir, I have found an excellent scholar of the Bhagavad." "Very well," said the man. "Bring him here." The other man replied, "But there is a little hitch. The scholar has a few plows and bullocks. He is busy with them all day. He must look after the cultivation of his land. He hasn't a moment's leisure." Thereupon, the man who required the scholar said, "I don't want a Bhagavad scholar who is burdened with plows and bullocks. I want a man who has leisure and can tell me about God." To Dr. Sarkar, do you understand? Dr. Sarkar remained silent.